What if Mount Rushmore had Star Wars characters? Let's discuss. Welcome to Princess and Scoundrel, where we take you along our scrappily ever after, from Fantasyland to Tatooine and everything in between. I'm Sarah.
And I'm Steven.
And you had a very interesting premise for this week's episode.
I would agree. I didn't want to say yes, but yes, I agree. Because it is the beginning of summer. So like school is finishing for some kids. And the biggest thing that I remember for summer was like vacationing, taking road trips. And yes, we travel pretty frequent throughout the year, but there's still something special about that, like summer traveling.
Yeah.
That road trip feel. And I think we were kind of having that conversation, like remembering, or like one of my road trips that I remember was we drove from Texas up to North Dakota, where Mount Rushmore is.
Or it's south. It's one of the Dakotas.
One of the Dakotas.
You went. Oh wait, so you went to Mount Rushmore?
Yeah.
Oh.
But it was very much because again, there was a reel that I saw where you go see it and you're like, okay,
cool.
Let's go
back in the car for another 18 hours.
So it was just like interesting, just that concept of like, okay, here I saw it, this thing, and then okay, and then you leave. But I thought, wouldn't it be fun if we kind of put our own spin on it? We kind of had a discussion of we could talk about like past vacations during our conversation, but put together what we would consider the Mount Rushmore of Star Wars at this point.
Yeah.
So we have the, original trilogy, the prequel, the sequels, Clone Wars, and some of it was like anthology, but like Mando. Like we have some Star Wars now. Acolytes coming out.
Ooh, okay.
Like right now, so we don't know. This is High Republic time, but
we don't have
the Skywalker saga.
Okay. Starting with episode 1, everything between episode 1 and episode 9.
Yeah.
Okay. Good, because you reminded me of something. I'm like, oh, maybe that person or thing would be better for this. So I have never been to Mount Rushmore. I as you're talking about it, because it's like a U.S. landmark. It's just some dudes that like carved people's faces into rocks, and now it's a thing that people go to, and that's kind of weird. Because like my big like family vacation as a kid was we drove to the Grand Canyon, and that's like a beautiful natural sight to see, right? Like that's not man-made. It was cool, but at the same time, like you stand there and you're like, that's a big canyon. That's a Grand Canyon. And it was neat, but like when you're a kid, you're just like, is there an arcade here? Like what's there to do? Like let's go do something. But yeah, now that I'm thinking about it, the whole idea of Mount Rushmore is very strange. So let's lay some ground rules here. Because one, who would commission Mount Rushmore also, right?
This is where I was like, oh yeah, let's just like pick characters. And you're like, well, what's the parameters? I'm like, I don't know, like just the ones that you like. She's like, well, or you say, well, let me go look into like why they like you had to make some rules. I'm like, geez, man, like now I have to really put some thought into this.
I made a worksheet that we had to fill out too. So this is just a behind the scenes of how this whole podcast works. Is typically you come up with an idea and I'm like, let me go research. Let me put things in boxes and organize the conversation. And so that's what I did. Is I knew nothing about Mount Rushmore. I never went. I never got I never read the signs along the path to there. But what it's 4 presidents, and they were all picked for a specific reason. And so it is don't look at my answers. It is George Washington, who was the birth of the nation. There was the growth of the nation, development, and the preservation of the nation. So that is why those 4 are up there. And the ones that are up there is George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Theodore Roosevelt, and Abraham Lincoln. Political figures, all of them presidents. So I was like, oh, do they have to be political figures that we're picking? Like, do they have to be human? Like, what are we? What
I
are
don't
our
know what to do with my
parameters?
hands.
I'm like, well, there's too much. I need wrangling in. So as we were having the conversation of like, okay, let's talk a little bit, but not too much about what it is that we want to do. I realized they were all picked for a reason. I'm like, okay, well, we could go through like who was responsible for the birth of Star Wars, the development of Star Wars, the growth of Star Wars, and the preservation of Star Wars, and we can pick characters that we think fit into that. But then I was like, okay, I'll build my Mount Rushmore and you'll build your Mount Rushmore.
And that's where we were kind of like, well, we don't want it to be the same, but then at the same time, we probably like we could work together as a unit. Like, here's what we think is the best. Like Princess and Scoundrel together.
Builds
This is what
Mount Rushmore.
build the Mount Rushmore.
Right.
Like, it's not a dictatorship; it's a democracy.
Okay, I like that. So,
well, and then too is like we could have that little discussion of like why you, because maybe my mind could be changed. Like I pick somebody because this is what my mindset is, but if you give me like, oh, that's a good counterpoint, like I kind of go, I want to go with that.
Okay, and if we can't come to a decision, so we're building one Mount Rushmore, one character for each of the four.
But the thing too is like
phases.
We want the listeners,
yes,
to also do this. Like, put that thought into it. Like, who do you think should be on these?
Right,
like your own Mount Rushmore.
Do you agree with us? Do you disagree with us? Like, you build your own Mount Rushmore. Put it in the comments as well, because we could be totally off base with this. So, first and foremost, do you know why it's called Mount Rushmore?
No.
So it's literally because some dude, is like a New York City attorney from New York City, went to go look at the area and like look at the titles and like who owned what land, and he walked by and he was like, so what do they call this place anyway? And the guide that was with him was like, oh, we don't have a name for it, but I guess we'll call it Rushmore, because the guy's name was Rushmore. Like, that's it. It was just like
the guy, he just has like a little book, like, okay, this is, Tanner Park, this is, whatever hill, and what is that?
What is that?
I don't know. Rushmore.
That was it. How easy.
Yeah. That's...
So before we even get into our four figures, who in Star Wars do you think would be like, well, I mean, if you're not going to name, like, if there's no name for it yet, it's going to be Mount whatever.
Okay, so since this is more, since you kind of have thought about this, like, the history of it,
yep.
I'm gonna let you go first, because
okay.
I'm thinking of who I think would be.
Okay, I have two. One of them I think would be my real answer would be Moff Gideon. I feel like he would love to. Mount Gideon just rolls off the tongue because Moff and Mount are very close to each other. I feel like if Moff Gideon had the opportunity to put his name on something, he would absolutely take it. He likes what is not his. And I think he would see a mountain, he'd be like, that's mine now. So,
okay. Mount
Gideon. My other suggestion would be Mount Chopper, because I feel like Chopper would just be like, mine. Just like claim it.
Okay, so I think those are pretty good. Gideon's a pretty good one because, like, again, I think the laying the claim of it. But based off the story that you just said, I think it would be like Mount Binks. Because Jar Jar would just be kind of strolling along and maybe just like stumble and, or just something like he causes some kind of avalanche where it causes this mountain to form.
Oh.
And, some kind of destruction. He just like picks a flower and it just causes it, and they're like, oh my gosh, that's Mount Binks.
Okay, you're gonna kick my butt at this game because I love that. Okay, so Mount Binks. So
are we declaring that that's what it's gonna be?
Mount Binks. I'm writing it down. It has nothing to do with your shirt that you're wearing right now.
Look at that. New Roosevelt's.
Mount Binks on your shirt, representing. Okay, so let's go through the first one, the birth of the nation, of the galaxy. So on Earth, George Washington represents that. And I'm going to read, there's like a couple sentences for each of them from the National Park Service website. So George Washington was picked because he was the father of the new country and laid the foundation of American democracy. I also have two on this one.
Did you have two just in case that I picked one of yours?
Well, no, not on this one, because for this one, it's like a very maybe meta or like too literal answer, and then I have an actual like in Star Wars Galaxy answer.
So I'm not going. My thought was nothing to do with like the blurb that you provided.
Oh,
It's more on just
great,
the
thanks.
birth.
Okay.
No, just the birth of it.
Yeah.
And I think for me, my first choice would be Luke Skywalker, because for me that scene of that farm boy watching the horizon with the two sons of Tatooine, just kind of showing that there's hope. Like that is the entire feeling of what Star Wars is like there's always this hope and this you're a dreamer type of thing. So
Yeah.
that to me was where it was like the birth of Star Wars for me.
That's beautiful. I disagree. So if you look at you're birthing Star Wars in the middle of the story.
Yeah.
That's episode 4. You have to go all the way back to episode 1. And like, who is it that really set all of these things in place that would last for the entirety of the 9 films and all of the movies and the stories that fall in between there? There was somebody that was calculating and moving puzzle pieces around, because without him, we would not have Darth Vader. We would not have Luke. We would not have conflict and war. And that is Sheev Palpatine.
So you're talking about
I'm talking about the birth of Star Wars.
the birther of the Skywalker.
And beyond that, if we're really talking about the birth of Star Wars, my first choice would be George Lucas.
Well, okay, so there was part of it that I was thinking, are we talking about the?
I think it's too meta to have George up there next to like a Luke.
And I think that's the thing is the like the creators of it are not part of this.
It has to be
this
in
exercise.
Galaxy. Don't come for us. We know George Lucas was in Star Wars. He made appearances in Star Wars, but he was not George Lucas in Star Wars. It was not Stan Lee making a cameo appearance as Stan Lee.
Yeah.
Like, as much as I think George Lucas deserves a spot on Mount Banks, I will stand firm with my choice as Sheev Palpatine for being the birth of all of the Skywalker saga as we know it.
I mean, yeah, it's. But I mean, so what would you say the Star Wars up to this point, the Star Wars sagas is?
It's episodes 1 through 9.
No, but I mean, it's
Anakin.
like it's Anakin's story, right?
It's Anakin's story.
It's primarily Anakin's story.
Primarily, but then I think that continues on through Rey's story and Leia. Through Leia. She makes it a little longer.
Well, but I mean, but that's the thing is like, does Palpatine still control the entire? I mean, I guess that's what you're saying.
He does, right? Because without Palpatine, Baby Yoda, Grogu, he's just some baby. Like, nobody wants him and nobody's chasing after him, and we don't have the Mando series without Project Necromancer. Like, Project Necromancer was a huge part of Bad Batch and what they wanted with Omega, with Grogu. If you look at the sequel trilogy, like Snoke, he was cool while he was around. Rey was a Palpatine. Like, he had his hand in. He was kind of not the backbone, but he was there for the entire trilogy of trilogies. He's not a good guy.
Yeah, no, I'm not liking where you're going. It does. There is this common thread through the entire thing with Palpatine. I don't think it's the birth of it.
Okay.
Because I'm still. He had to control, like, he didn't have the power. It was a Skywalker.
But then would it be Anakin?
But because there's other faces on there, there's difference. And that's why I say Luke, because Luke was that's why we got shown episode 4 first, because that's where it became something. Because without Anakin, there was no Palpatine, or there's nothing for Palpatine to like manipulate.
Unless,
and then without Luke, Anakin couldn't have turned good. you know? So it's like
That's like a
this,
chicken or the egg situation, though, because then it wouldn't not be Anakin would be the birth, because without Anakin, we don't have Luke to then pull Anakin back at the end.
that's yes. But again, it's just
So
like,
is it Shmi?
well, no, but I'm just saying
Yeah.
is like that without Luke, because that's where that linchpin is like if you take Luke out,
Then Vader's just Vader.
Vader's just Vader. He doesn't have that development of seeing what he did wrong.
Okay.
And it's like same thing. If you take Anakin out, where does Palpatine go from there? Yes, like there could have been a different story, but we're talking about this story.
About the Skywalker saga.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
fair.
it's like without them, but with Luke, he has so much connection to either it be his connection to the Force with Ben, Leia, learning about Anakin, helping Anakin or Vader become Anakin again. Like there's so much connection. Like that is the linchpin.
The linchpin.
That's where I say is like that's the birth of it.
By that,
and then just the story of what Star Wars is about hope. It's about the Force, like him learning the Force and like learning that it doesn't mean that it's picking up rocks,
Yeah.
So
that's fair.
I think that's for me would be
okay. Here's what I think we should do. I don't think we should like hash out and come to a decision on each one of them because
Okay.
you're gonna hate my next answer. So I think we give all of our answers, and then at the end we'll go back and we'll duke it out, and we'll do like rock paper scissors if we have to,
Okay.
just to figure out like exactly. But to that point of really like Obi-Wan could also be the birth of Star Wars because he was also there from the beginning. He helped with Anakin. He helped with Luke. Like he helped with Ahsoka. Like he was there for the beginning of it. And like Luke found R2, but if Ben hadn't been like, I mean, we could watch this message and see what happens, then that Luke would have just stayed a farm boy on Tatooine.
Yeah.
So
I mean, and that's where
third contender enters the ring, I think.
No.
Okay, fine. Sheev or Luke. We couldn't keep it all like light side either. So I had to throw one out there. Okay.
I mean, you're playing a dangerous game.
We're holding on that. We're moving to growth next. So let me read what the Earth version is. Thomas Jefferson. Jefferson was the primary author of the Declaration of Independence, a document which inspires democracies around the world. He also purchased territory from France, which doubled the size of our country, adding all or part of 15 present-day states. So literally grew it in inspiring democracies around the world, so politically, and then physically growing our country. So who physically grew the galaxy that we know? You go first on this one.
So this one,
Okay.
Like you said, I'm not gonna pick the good guys, or I'm picked Vader because
Ooh,
the
okay.
entire Skywalker saga, we saw the growth of Anakin.
Uh-huh.
So it was young Anakin, hopeful, Anakin, teenage Anakin, angsty, hate sand, turn into Vader, being Vader, learning about Luke and Leia, turning over, fighting Palpatine. And then at the end, it was more of just like a shadow of what Vader was, but to help.
I mean, but he's still like, he was a shadow over
Rey.
Kylo.
Well, I think that's more of a manipulation from
Palpatine.
Palpatine, not really the actual Vader.
That's fair.
I
Funny.
think the Anakin voice was more what it was.
That's fair. Do you want to hear mine?
Sure.
So you went with Vader. I'm just going to come out and say what mine was. Padme. Which they go hand in hand. Padme was the light side to Vader's dark side, right?
Yeah.
She literally grew those babies in her belly. Like she grew Luke and Leia.
But see, what's the importance of Luke and Leia? And that's why I go back to.
But then maybe Vader
the birth
should be
of Star Wars is Luke, because if you're gonna say that the growth of it was Padme, like what's the importance of Luke and Leia?
That's fair. Okay, that's a good point. But listen to me. Let me give my spiel.
Let's go. I like this. I like that we're able to let's poke some holes in these.
Yeah, I like this. I don't like when you poke holes in my logic, but I like when I do it to you. So Padme starts out with episode 1, right? Like, she is already a political figure. She is helping to negotiate peace among different planets and different political sects. And she is there for the people. She's helping to grow peace and spread peace across the galaxy.
Okay.
Right?
Yep.
Then she falls in with Anakin and they have their love tryst, but she continues to grow. She moves from a queen over to a senator, and she continues to fight for what is right and for the people. Because of her love with Anakin, she gets married and has these babies that are growing within her. And they literally go on to serve as the storyline for the original trilogy.
But then her impact kind of stops there. I think that's where it doesn't, for the entire series, it doesn't, they kind of reference back, like, do you remember your mother? Do you remember your father? You know, type of thing. But again,
but they
I don't
couldn't
know.
because they never knew her.
But that's, to me, that's where the impact of it doesn't go past the prequels.
Okay.
And then even too, like, you know, just again, poking holes, Padme was manipulated by Palpatine. For her to be able to be manipulated, like, it's not a shame on her, but it's
shame on Palpatine.
Yeah. Like being
the
able
birth of the galaxy.
But there's that, and then the fact that she was kind of okay with Anakin slaughtering all those Tusken Raiders.
I mean, she wasn't okay with it, but it's like sometimes you let things go in a relationship when you're like, man, I really love
that's
this
a little
dude,
toxic,
but like, that's not like if we were just first dating, I don't think I'd be okay with that.
So yeah, I mean, I think that's I'm right now I'm just more poking holes in your choice.
Yeah, I feel that deeply. Moving on.
Well, I mean, what is on mine as Vader being the growth of,
I mean,
the Star Wars story?
You're not wrong. Like, Vader did grow the galaxy and grew the conflict in the story that Star Wars is. He was the conflict in the original trilogy. I mean, there was also Palpatine for all of them.
Yeah.
But he's a bad guy. He didn't necessarily grow it in a good way, but that's not.
But I think he did.
How did he grow it in a good way?
Because he
at the very end.
Well, that's the thing, is like he had his own personal growth, but then he grew. Like, if you look at the original trilogy, Luke, you know, saw him as this bad guy, like surface level as this bad guy. Once he discovered that, hey, he had some connection, like, this is my father, that, wait a minute, there is good in him. And for him to surpass, like, just being, you know, Luke and being this Jedi master, he had to, like, okay, I got to release my anger, because me being angry at, you know, Vader, because he's just this bad guy, like, we're not gonna get to resolution. So he's like, hey, go ahead and, like, you know, I'm here for you, type of thing. And he just, like, he was able to make Luke grow. And at that time, Anakin grew because he's like, okay, I don't have to be angry anymore. So there's like a double growth.
Okay, but if you talk about like physically and with people,
and then his legacy carried on through Luke into the sequels. And I shake my head because it's like Luke didn't get to finish that full story, which I think that's some argument people have. But him going and learning that, you know, he's so focused on the text and gets too focused on that, he's kind of doing the same cycle of Anakin until everything starts burning, and then he learns, like, hey, it wasn't about the books,
the text. I mean, you have good arguments. I can't really poke too many holes in it, except that I don't want you to win. Okay, moving on.
Okay.
Next one. Development on Earth was Theodore Roosevelt. It says he was instrumental in negotiating the construction of the Panama Canal, linking the East and the West. He was known as the Trust Buster for his work to end large corporate monopolies and ensure the rights of the common working man. Theodore Roosevelt. Who do you think inspired development?
Before we move on to the other one, I want to do like a honorable mention for my growth.
Oh, you had one in there.
I did. And it was because I was thinking of the growth of the story. So I have a good one, like with Vader.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty like, I'm good with
Okay.
that.
We hear you.
But the other part of it, I was thinking as far as growth of the entire series. So we have the Skywalker saga, but I was like, should we have Mando, the Mandalorian, be the growth of like the expansion of the Star Wars story?
But do you mean it from a perspective of like outside of the galaxy, like bringing in new fans to Star Wars, or do you mean literally like that it's not that it was really the first? Well, was it the first like show that had nothing to do with the Skywalkers?
Pretty much. And that's what I'm saying. It's like it grew it out instead of it being so Skywalker saga. Like it's still within that time, and there's still connections to it.
Yeah.
So people like you could still grasp it, but it was taking a different turn.
Yeah, but I mean, like, look at Rebels. Like, Rebels was kind of similar in that it was in the same vein, but it wasn't focused on the Skywalkers.
And that's why I didn't pick Rebels. I mean, the Clone Wars Rebels. I didn't choose those because they were so close to, or like as far as in my head thinking growth.
Yeah.
Like they didn't really take a big left turn.
Right.
You know, they stayed still within that realm of the Clone Wars and still like the expansion of the Clone Wars.
But again, without Palpatine, Mando would have been like a Monster of the Week type show, and we wouldn't have the conflict that we had with Grogu.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's just that common thread.
Because I do think, and we can't talk about the Mandalorian and the Grogu movie, or Grogu, whatever the movie's called. We can't talk about it because it's not out yet. But that's probably going to heavily tie it into the Skywalker series. But I see what you're saying. But follow-up question.
Okay.
Would you, on Mount Banks, put the Mandalorian helmet? Would you carve the Mandalorian helmet, or would you carve Din Djarin?
I would be Mandalorian helmet.
No. I mean, Pedro Pascal. I'd go visit that mountain.
I mean, they're supposed to be full bodies too, right?
Fun fact. I'm a recent Mount Rushmore history buff. They were supposed to be head down to waist, but they ran out of money.
Yeah, like always.
Whatever.
So we're talking about.
What if they made it out of actual Beskar, so it's just like blinds everybody that goes.
I wonder, like, if it has like a
also Vader. What are you
rust.
gonna do with Vader? Helmet Vader?
Yeah, it's gonna be helmet Vader.
No, I want crusty burnt Vader. So that way, if there's ever like, if Banks's children go and visit, and there's ever another avalanche, and it like, some of the rocks fall off, it still looks like Vader.
Imagine if they could do it where like over time it erodes.
Just, like, the helmet starts like falling off, and it's Anakin underneath.
Yeah, dude,
that right there.
I saw a clip of the Kenobi when they merged.
The voices.
The voices.
Yeah.
Oh man, it still like gives me chills, like how well it was done.
That was such a good show.
And I want to go.
I want to go rewatch that show because as we're talking about it, I'm like, I would just put Obi-Wan for all of these. I love Obi-Wan.
But and that was the other thing. Like I was thinking is putting how it looks, how it's gonna look all together. That's another little thought I was putting.
So the aesthetics.
Yeah. But yeah.
Imagine Sheev up there, like full Emperor Palpatine, and there's like, oh my god, and then you can have like lightning rods. You have his hands.
Oh, they
have lightning rods.
They're
at the
actual
end of them.
lightning rods.
How good would that be? You may reconsider now with Luke as the birth. Okay, so
but see, I wonder if the Star Wars universe had. I mean, I guess they do. Like at the end of Ahsoka, they had like the deities like pointing at different places, so they did have something similar to it.
They did. That's very true. Okay, so development. So here's where it gets a little tricky to me. We talked about Theodore Roosevelt and that he helped with the development. To me, growth and development, they overlap each other so much. So to me, when I think growth, in this instance, I'm thinking of like truly growing and expanding the Star Wars galaxy. But development, I think of like not necessarily technological development, but just like progression or evolution of the Star Wars galaxy. So that's in my mind where it's a little bit different because I feel like those two, they're the same thing. I think they were just kind of like, what's another word for growth?
Well, I think it's just taking that next step.
Okay, so I'm gonna go first this time. I actually had put Luke as the development of the Star Wars galaxy because it was truly Luke's story and his involvement, specifically in the original trilogy, that was Star Wars. Like it was Luke's development all the way through the sequel trilogy, where you see him, like you said, going and protecting the techs and doing all of this stuff and drinking the weird green milk and all the things that he did. But it was Luke's story, and he was the one that most people, when they found Star Wars, they attached themselves to, and they saw themselves in Luke. And so over the 40 years that they told Luke's story, it was it was his development, and you see yourself in him in different stages of his life. Now scratch all that because we already have Luke for somebody. And mine is one of my favorite Star Wars characters, Mon Mothma. Not Mothma. Mon Mothma. And the reason I pick her is mostly, I mean, she's a political figure, but she was involved, again, for the entirety of the story, where she was a senator that was involved in the prequels. She had her hand in all of it, and she helped to develop and to fight the Galactic Empire. She was a chancellor at the end of it. She was helping to lead the rebel cause whenever Leia was like coming up into her like political rise. Like Mon was there to help guide her and be a mentor to her, like even till the very end. So in terms of development, and if you're talking about specifically like the light side and the rebel side of the Star Wars galaxy, Mon was really there, like being very strategic about what she could do. And you saw a lot of that in Andor and the work that she was doing behind the scenes, where she like, here's who I am, here's the political figure that I am publicly, but then secretly I'm going and I'm helping these people over here and planting these seeds that then took off. I just want to see Mon on Mount Banks.
Okay.
Okay.
I mean, right now, I was actually really concerned that we were going to have our decisions were going to be so close, but we are so far,
really
so far
I know
different.
who you're going to pick for this.
Who do you think I'm going to pick?
I think you're going to pick Ahsoka.
I am.
Yeah. Okay.
And so the reason
is
the development. And again, this is the Skywalker saga.
Is it because she's right behind you?
Yes. But for me, the Skywalker saga, we had the original trilogy, and it was almost just, we saw the growth, the birth of Luke, but his growth, and then kind of at the end, the tail end of Anakin's growth. The prequels came out, and you got to see it was more Anakin's story. He grew up, he was manipulated by Palpatine, and turned, but he always had this good in him. And I think with the Clone Wars, when they made the Clone Wars, it just solidified that he didn't come out of, he wasn't bad, like from the beginning.
Right.
He was just manipulated. And his story with Ahsoka, there was just kind of this back and forth, and they follow the path so closely that it's almost to a point where he took a left turn, she took a right turn, and it would have been the exact opposite.
Yeah.
So I think that's why it's having Vader up there as what was it? I had him
development
as growth. She is the development. So it's kind of like they're hand in hand, the same, but we see his entire story, whereas hers could have been the entire story, but here's that alternate universe of decisions.
See, you kept yours. Okay, well, we'll come back to it at the
yeah, we want to start looking at what our
I want to look at like your total thought process, but I want to get through all of it, because I think we took different approaches on this, but I love it. I really thought we were going to have the same answers. Okay, back to our last figure that we're putting on Mount Banks. So preservation. So on Earth, we have Abraham Lincoln. Lincoln held the nation together during the greatest trial, the Civil War. Lincoln believed his most sacred duty was the preservation of the Union. It was his firm conviction that slavery must be abolished. So, who would you put for the preservation of the Star Wars galaxy?
Are you ready for it?
Oh, no, you put the same one I did. I can just tell with your face that you picked the same one.
I don't have any face.
You have a face. You're so giddy right now, and you only get that way. Can I guess again what you're going to pick? Because I have the same figure. Is it a human?
Yes.
Oh, it is. Oh, then we don't have the same one.
Okay. See.
Okay. So tell me yours.
So for the preservation of the Skywalker saga, I chose Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Ah, dude, you kept your. That's not Mount Binks. That's Mount Skywalker. Like, your 4 figures are so tightly connected to each other.
But this is the Skywalker saga. What we have now.
It's the galaxy.
It is the galaxy, but these are, of this story, these are the most prominent figures.
Well, go tell me your why.
So the preservation of it
Obi-Wan?
is he was reluctant to take Anakin on.
Right.
But he became his brother. And he stayed truer to their belief of the order. And it broke his heart with Vader. You know, Anakin being killed by Vader, quote unquote. I'm, doing the air quotes. But even when he tells Luke about it, how you want to perceive it, how you want to, like, in your mind, in my mind, he doesn't tell Luke right away because he's trying to preserve Anakin's story.
Mm-hmm.
He wants to preserve what he remembers of Anakin, not Vader.
Yeah.
And then through the entire time, he's still training Luke up to fight Vader as Vader, not as Anakin. And then once he kind of gets caught, he's kind of like, well, at a certain point of view, I was telling you the truth. And yes, there's that conflict, but he kept that story going.
Yeah.
And even when he's a Force ghost, he is still, like, cheering, Luke on, in the sequel. So he is just that preservation of that story.
That's beautiful. Mine is very different.
Okay.
I actually didn't pick Obi-Wan for any of mine.
I mean,
I'm surprised. So I will say I did have Ahsoka on there because I do feel like she helped to preserve over the entirety. I'm looking at it of, like, the 9 episodes.
Okay.
Over the entirety of the 9 episodes, including Clone Wars, including Rebels, all Mandalorian. She's in all of it. Like, except for the original trilogy, Ahsoka is everywhere in Star Wars. I guess she wasn't in the original trilogy, but she was there in Clone Wars. She was there. She was preserving it. She was preserving the Jedi way and, like, helping to keep that somewhat intact. Not to the point that Luke was, where he was creating his own, like, new, like, Jedi Academy or whatever. But she was there, and she was following she wasn't a Jedi at that point, but she was kind of following this path of, like, her beliefs and what she thought the Jedi probably more should have been. So I feel like she would be a good candidate. But my actual candidate for the preservation of the Star Wars galaxy, the one that truly was in every single movie, every single show, every single piece of every Star Wars, my boy, R2-D2.
Okay. So on this one, because I have a soft spot for droids,
and this is I know that. That's why I thought you picked R2.
You're playing to my heartstrings here.
Yes.
Because, again,
they're not your heartstrings.
There's the argument within the droid builder
your wire
world.
Connectors.
Within the droid builder world, R2 is the hero of the story.
Of the whole story. But he literally preserves it. He preserves Leia's message to then go give to Ben. Like, he is the keeper. Like, every time you think R2's memory is going to be wiped, like, you're like, no. He has all of these things in there. Like, I'm watching Clone Wars right now, so I'm kind of, like, going through it when they thought that they wiped his memory. R2 is it, dude. Like, he is the one. He is the keeper. He is the archivist of everything that happened in the Star Wars galaxy that we know of.
I mean, it's a...
I might win this one. Oh.
I'm trying to think of like the preservation itself. Like,
Also, representation. We only have humans on here.
yeah,
No, we have Ahsoka. Ahsoka's up
Ahsoka,
there. That's it.
Vader.
Vader's not. He's still a
He's
human.
he's
Kind
more
of.
machine than man now. You not remember what Obi-Wan said?
Stop it. But yeah, I think I feel very strongly that R2 should be the representative of the preservation of the Star Wars galaxy.
Well, and so okay, I think the other part of it is to kind of think of the story of what it was initially supposed to be. So this is where I'm kind of remember it was supposed to be more of the adventures of R2 and C3PO.
I don't know that.
Well, that's what like Star Wars was kind of supposed to be. That's why it
Really?
starts with them two on the
Oh,
ship. Like
okay.
it was kind of their adventures. So it could almost be said that they could be the
birth,
birth of it.
the growth, the development. It could be growth, could be R2, and development could be C3PO. We just do droids.
That has to be another episode where it's just droids.
And it's Mount and Zelen. And it's just droids.
I think the biggest ones I have, like, it's the two outs. Like, those are the ones that we have the biggest. When you saying Palpatine, I'm like, oh man, I guess like that is like that's the one. That's a hard one for me, and then R2 one's a hard one for me to like be like, oh man, they're really good, and there's a valid argument for me.
Okay.
But again, now look at it in its completion. Here's your mountain.
Before we get to that though, I feel like looking at your picks, because I wrote them all down, you picked Luke, Vader, Ahsoka, Obi-Wan. Like it is all super tight knit into pretty much the main character. I mean, poor justice for Leia, because Leia's not in there.
Yeah.
But there's only 4. But you kept it very tight knit to like the Skywalker saga. I was looking at it more of like the entire galaxy as we know it between episode 1 and 9, and like who were bigger players. Because if you look at the Skywalker saga and their storyline specifically, yes, the ones you picked are the main characters, but
and that's exactly how I looked at it. Is like if I remove one character, if I remove this character,
yeah,
how much does that story change?
See, but I'm looking at it more of like you're looking very small scale and I was looking larger scale. Like who are the bigger players in the galaxy during these times? And that's why I picked Sheev. That's why I picked Padme, Mon Mothma, and then R2. Because I was looking at like, I guess from the larger, like if you're looking at the history books, like when you're looking at the history books, they're writing about the big things that happened. Whereas you're looking at like a novel of here's what happened to the Skywalker family during all of these events. If that makes sense?
I think it's the opposite. I think I'm looking at it at the entire series of it, and you're looking at just the moments in time of how they like these people had major impacts of those certain times.
No, but like if you look at I forget what there's so much new Star Wars lately. There were things that would happen and be like, nah man, the Empire's gone. Like Palpatine's dead. And they're like, no.
And that's what I say.
You
like,
sure about that? Like the word didn't travel down to like the lower people. It took a long time for it to travel down. And so that's why I'm like, maybe we should look at like more of the bigger political figures or the ones that were kind of bouncing around throughout the galaxy and not just that center line. But I don't think the way that you looked at it was wrong either.
Yeah.
So that's where it's like, okay, now this is the decision time. Like we have to let's build Mount Banks. Okay. Birth of the galaxy. Is it Sheev?
Or is it Luke?
Now that we've heard our whole stories.
Well, it's not the birth of the galaxy. And I think that's the thing to also like.
But that's how I looked at it. You looked at it as, but
it's not the birth. Like that's the thing is how far back, Sheev learned his evilness from Plagueis. Like you could go back now the Acolyte, like the evilness came from some other
episode
Sith.
1.
Well, but I'm just saying is like where was the birth of this story that we know? And that's the hard part is, and again, Galaxy Ahsoka, we're going to different galaxies.
Okay.
So it's like we're looking at this story in time in this galaxy.
Okay, but don't forget lightning rods at the ends of his fingers.
I'm super pumped
If
about
you're
that.
looking at like aesthetics, which would you rather go look at? Like a big, massive sculpture of Luke Skywalker or Palpatine during a thunderstorm?
Well, I hope you wouldn't go during a thunderstorm.
Well,
but
maybe there's like there's a building that you can watch it from. It's
okay.
very safe.
Okay.
Okay.
No, I mean, I'm trying to think of like where the birth of that story is, and Palpatine did manipulate a lot to get this story on its path.
How about this? I will give you Luke if you give me R2.
Well, I mean, you're jumping like way ahead. Like,
well, I know, but I really want R2. So like I'm bargaining here. It's negotiating.
Just like the politics.
Here, you know what? We're not even going to make a deal right now. I'm just going to go ahead and give you Luke. Just remember, remember that when we get to preservation.
But I think that as far as like, okay, should it be Luke though?
Well, I think just from a very, very broad standpoint, Luke was the birth of Star Wars for so many people. Like, if you're looking at it as a fan of somebody that's actually watching the movies, like he is what ignited the spark of Star Wars for so many people. But then also his place in it, like you said, Vader wouldn't have then come back to being a good person at the end of it. So I give you Luke. Remember that. Moving on to growth, we have Vader or Padme. I know you feel very strongly about Vader, and so I'm willing to give you Vader on this one.
Well, see, I don't want it to be necessarily just my choices.
Yeah, well, that's why I told you when we get to R2, pick my dude. When you're looking at iconic, the other thing is look at the aesthetics of it. When you're looking at iconic Star Wars figures, are people going to recognize Padme? You'd have to do like Queen Amidala Padme, right? Yeah. Vader, you're going to have to do a helmet Vader. You can't do
Anakin.
Yeah, like
well, I mean,
Anakin.
Again, that's the story behind it. Like you're going to see if it's Padme, like that big headdress and whatever, but there's going to be the big board of all the different dresses that she wore.
But I do appreciate your point in that Vader's legacy was more long lasting than Padme's legacy. Like Padme served a very important purposes in her life, but then when her life ended, it really was up to her children to carry that legacy forward, even though they didn't know that Padme was their mom.
Yeah.
Right. So fair. I give you Vader. Vader, growth, right next to Luke. Luke and Vader. Look at that. Reunited.
Yeah.
On Mount Banks. Development. We have Mon Mothma, which I said it right this time, and Ahsoka Tano. I love what you said. Like I hate that I'm agreeing with you so much. I want to poke holes in all of your logic here. But I really like what you said about Anakin and Ahsoka. They were following down the same path, and at some point there was manipulation going on, and there was, I mean, the Jedi Order was a lot of manipulation, but there was manipulation going on.
And that's why she walked away.
At some point, Ahsoka was like, no, I know what's right. I'm walking away from this. And Anakin continued to let the manipulation get to him from the Jedi and then from Palpatine, the birth of the galaxy. And he went a different direction. And so I do think it makes sense to have Ahsoka up there.
Yeah.
So I give you that one.
Nice.
Reluctantly. So you're 3 for 3 right now.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
So the other part of it, like when you said I also agree that there should have been, because this motley crew of, and this is, again, what I was thinking is having Leia up there, because Vader put himself into Luke and Leia. They're like the two parts of like the strong-willed, Leia was that part of it.
Like the speech that Obi-Wan gave her.
Yeah. And Luke was more that the tantrum, the kid, the
deep feelings.
Yeah. The emotional part of himself.
Right.
And I think that's where, for the Ahsoka one, I was thinking of doing Leia, because again, I'm looking at the entire aesthetic of it, of having Luke, Vader, Leia, and then Obi-Wan, because he was kind of that brother to, like, it all going together. But then I had to look more at the entire story,
Yeah.
and I was like, for me, Ahsoka was that more developed through all of the stories.
Yeah.
For me,
No, I agree. And Ahsoka had a big part in Vader's life and in Luke's life that
it
we
still
saw.
continues
And
to.
still continues to. But we saw it in Mandalorian with Luke and Ahsoka. So I don't like that we're picking all your picks, but I agree with them. So then the last one, preservation. You've got Obi-Wan. You've got R2-D2. Droid. How cute is he gonna look? He could light up. Oh my god, he could have.
Oh, is that where they're gonna have the little museum in there?
Yeah, you could eat up there and it spins. Fun fact about Mount Rushmore. Are they fun facts? I don't really know. We were talking about it though. There is a room behind Mount Rushmore where they were gonna like kind of have I think they were gonna have like a museum back there. It was called like the preservation room.
Is that? Oh,
like,
that was
Richie Rich. Like, wasn't that I don't know if it was the first one or the second one, but that was like there was a
bank or vault back there.
There was a vault back behind Mount Rushmore. That's the only thing I know about Mount Rushmore before preparing for this episode. But yeah, fun fact. So I don't know would the Jedi text be kept back there?
Yeah, the books.
So Obi-Wan or R2-D2?
It's a hard one because I think just like R2, Obi-Wan had been there from the beginning. He saw Anakin from the beginning. Like, again, I'm in my head, the Skywalker saga.
Yeah.
He saw Anakin as a child, and he saw it started to like the conflict starting with the Separatists and him going to, meeting Jar Jar. Like he's there, but he's just like this player that's significant, but almost insignificant, right? Like he's there the entire time,
like a right-hand man instead of like the main character.
Yeah, they always there, but never like almost underrated in a sense.
Yeah, that's fair.
So that's why I considered Obi-Wan. But again, R2 is the same thing. Was like there, helping out wherever he can.
Similar to Padme though, like once Obi-Wan dies, like what carries on from him, except for the learnings that
he still comes back, and he learned from Qui-Gon to be a Force ghost. He helps Luke,
who isn't a Force ghost now though. Like you watch Last Jedi, like they're all talking to her.
At the time, he was like, he gave us the certain point of view, and then he's talking to him. Use the Force, Luke. Like he's continuing that story of like, hey, here's stay on the good side.
I mean, I still think it's R2-D2. I think in terms of preservation, there is no shelf life on a droid. Like you can just keep like changing the parts out. You can keep upgrading, and he'll be around forever to preserve the story of what happened with Skywalkers.
Because I think it could be the fan favorite. So that's going to be the most debated one, but it'll get people, it'll draw the crowds.
So are we not picking a development one? Or are we leaving this up?
No, we're leaving it like we're gonna put R2, but it's gonna be like when people visit, they're like, you know what? There was this big conflict of who should have been that fourth one.
But you're not giving me R2 because you won the first three.
There's a little bit of that too.
That's you hesitated.
There's a bit of that.
Rude. R2 belongs up there. Droid rights.
Yeah.
Representation for the droids, please. You're a droid builder. How would you not just fall in love with?
That's what I'm saying. Like it's hard for me to.
But once I picked R2, I was like, should I go back and pick droids for all of them?
See, I think that could be a different one where it's just like
that's where it's hard. Is I thought we were putting enough parameters on this, but then the way that you took it and the way I took it was totally different. So okay, let me read out Mount Binks. So the story of Mount Binks is that Jar Jar Binks was on an excursion. He was trampling through the forests with all of these mountain ranges, right? We don't know what planet it was on. I suggested Tantus when we were talking about it.
That it's going to be really hard for visitors.
Yeah. But where else could you go? Mortis? You can't go to, can you just like go to Mortis?
No.
I don't know.
You have to be, it has to be somewhere easy. Like
where though?
I mean, Tatooine has a lot of just.
They don't have mountain.
Land.
You need like mountain though. It's just sand. They're gonna be little sand castles out of.
No, they have like cliffs that they have.
I guess nobody wants to go there though. Put it on.
That's
Jakku.
where you have to draw people in.
Put it on Jakku.
That's the tourist, the firm.
Okay, so that's what we need help with that. Where do we put Mount Binks? Anyway, so Jar Jar Binks is going through some kind of a forest, a desert, maybe a water planet. Who knows where he is? And he picks a flower that he likes, and an avalanche happens, and it reveals this cliffside landscape that would be perfect for. They're already kind of shaped like 4 heads, so that's why they stick with the 4.
Okay.
So then Jar Jar's like, "Oh, that's really cool. Let's carve some faces. I heard about this Earth place. Let's carve some faces. Let's get some tourists over here." So who are we gonna get? So for the birth, to celebrate the birth of the Star Wars galaxy, is Luke Skywalker. I think that's fair. I think it's a little weird that the birth is the kid of who is representing the growth of the Star Wars galaxy, which is Darth Vader. But we'll have Luke. We'll have next to him Darth Vader, helmet on, maybe helmet a little cracked.
Well, because it's gonna be cracked like on the
It's gonna
left
be like
side where
there's just like a
Ahsoka's
natural
facing. Yeah,
okay, so it's gonna be the Ahsoka side that gets the burn.
because they're gonna kind of be facing each other.
Gotcha. Okay, so then for the development of the Star Wars galaxy, we'll have Ahsoka Tano up there. It's just the head, so I guess we have to figure out like the timeline. Also for Luke, is it old Luke? Is it farm boy Luke?
I think it's gonna be Farm Boy, or even like Empire. I think that's like because they're gonna pick their time that they look the best. So.
Okay. So then you'll have Ahsoka up there. Do you do Ahsoka the White?
No, I think it's gonna be like Clone Wars Ahsoka.
Okay, but like end of Clone Wars, like season 7. Clone
Either
Wars.
that or like Rebels Ahsoka, because that's when it's like full, like just pure, like not Jedi
like
Order,
completely gone from Jedi. Okay, and then the one that never changes, my boy, for preservation of Star Wars, R2-D2. I mean, he could be a little rusty. It's okay. Like you said, he could have a patina on him, but his head's going to turn. That's where there's going to be an observation lookout. It's going to have like a glass floor, so you could look down if you wanted to.
Oh, man.
It's going to be, of the 4 figures, this one, you should have come up with better, because R2-D2 is
maybe
be like,
when you're in there,
wow.
that's when you could look at a certain angle, like a certain point of view.
From a certain point of view, it's
like Anakin. I mean, the Vader helmet
Vader.
looks like an actual, like looks like Anakin type
That'd
of
be
thing.
pretty cool.
Kind of like the Steamboat Willie.
Because R2 was
like
there
the
for all
form.
of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And the Little Mermaid.
I think that'd be a good
Okay. Vader's
good compromise.
Vader's
so like on the
shape.
outside, it looks like Vader, but when you look at it from the R2 angle.
I like that. Okay, so that's it. We've built Mount Binks.
Yeah.
That's
So you all who are listening, maybe even watching, we'll put like maybe a little graphic of. I'm gonna try to put that together.
Okay.
I'm feeling silly, but
yeah. Let us know.
Let us know what you think, how we did, what changes you would do, what would be your Mount Binks.
Were we completely off base with Mount Binks? Like, I feel like we did pretty good. I think together, like we probably needed like a larger committee to build this, because I think there could be improvements to this. But
I think that's the other thing too, is like when there's like the nominations, you're gonna have this story, like why, because sometimes that helps like tremendously.
It really does. When you said Vader, I was like, nah, dude. But no, I get it. It was good. So Vader and Ahsoka.
You let us know how we did. What's your choice?
Drop it in the comments. And then also, we did just open up bookings for the next Good Journey cruise. So if you're interested in going on that, there will be a link in the description where you can go cruise with all your fellow Star Cruiser fans. It will be a wonderful time. We can't wait to do it again. But until next time.